So welcome, everyone, to our evening with Social Perspectives. We're really excited to welcome you here on behalf of the Denver Press Club and the Denver Post and Public Relations Society of America. This is sort of a continuation of we all joined together last fall to present a series called Tap the Vote, where we had discussions around the election, and we had a lot of fun. And Chuck had the great idea of doing some themed editorial pages this year, and we will be doing conversations after his periodically appearing pieces in the Post, themed editorial sections. We'll be doing conversations like these. So we hope you keep your eyes open and try and join us for some of these events. We're really happy to bring it to you. The Denver Press Club in particular is a great place for these kind of events. If you haven't been here before, we hope you love it and come back. We like to say that it's a place where great conversation starts, and we believe the same thing with Public Relations Society of America and of course the Post. It's just a nice partnership because we all are really invested in dialogue and conversation and sharing information and ideas and thoughts, and that's what helps elevate our society, right? So again, we're happy to be here. If you're interested in learning more about the club afterwards, please let me know or somebody from the club, and we'd be happy to share more with you. So tonight we've got a wonderful panel, and our moderator this evening is Megan Schrader, who's an editorial writer, and she's gonna take it from here. So enjoy.
Hi, so this is the second of our Social Perspectives event. The last time we tackled Tabor. Tonight, obviously, it's social media. And we brought you writers from a variety of backgrounds on this theme for our section that ran Sunday. And tonight, hopefully, we presented them to you to ask questions of them and engage with them. Daniel Petty is our senior editor for the Now team. And he looked at how the internet Goliaths of Google and Facebook are killing the news industry in his piece. Ian Silverii, executive director of ProgressNow Colorado, he saw the good in Twitter and the way that it connects elected officials with their constituents in a real-time way that never existed before. Kelly Maher, in her piece, she's the executive director of Compass Colorado, and she looked at, I'll put it in her words, how we have become surrounded by such a wealth of information, we now face a new problem. When we have access to all the information in the world, it's tantamount to having access to none. And then Chuck Plunkett, the editor of the Denver Post's editorial pages, explored the way social media has forced the news industry to get better. And believe it or not, it has done that in a lot of ways, despite some of the bad sides. Right. So I would like to just open it up quickly to the audience. We hope to keep this short, 30, 45 minutes, but want to give everyone an opportunity. You've come out to engage with us and to talk about this issue, how social media is affecting politics and policy and our society, our relationships with one another. Please, does anyone want to start it off? Does anyone have any questions of our panelists that they would like to ask?
I have a question. Trolls. You're looking at it.
Yes, they're not joking.
Trolls are out there just putting garbage on social media. What can we do about it?
Ian, why don't you take that one first? And if you want to stand up and come to the microphone.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm sorry.
This became less fun immediately. Do I need to use them? I don't need to, right? You can hear me? Okay. Hi, thanks for having me. This is really great. I love this building. I love weird old bars and books and things like this place smells like an old library. It's like the best thing I've been to in a long time. So thanks for spending your Tuesday night here. Trolls. I think what you mean are people who intentionally use social media to attack people, generally with falsehoods, and contribute. I have to? Crap.
You just put that on the live stream.
Oh. Trolls, I think what you mean is people who attack each other on social media, generally without valid information or facts, use it to either disseminate false information, bother people, get people to sort of quit the internet by bullying them, or otherwise engaging them in like a negative conversation. Is that about right?
Well, primarily promoting
Sure.
Then we have this idea that we read this, we want to believe it, some of us, and so we believe it. Then we then promote it.
Right. So,
So what we used to have was gossip.
mhm.
But that's a small community. Now we have internet.
Well,
It's instantaneous.
yes and no. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, and you have grocery stores here too. And when you're standing online at the grocery store, you pick up the National Enquirer or World News. That's like the original fake news. That's what it used to be, and everybody knew what it was because it sat there in the grocery store rack and it said "Bat Boy lives," and this is clearly nonsense, right? It's different now, and it's different now primarily because of anonymity and because of reinforcing your own biases and beliefs. So when somebody shares something that attacks your opponents, you tend to believe it. Why? Because you have a negative view of your opponents. Whether or not it's true, whether it's demonstrably false within seconds, studies actually show that being presented with data to counter a piece of false information that agrees with your existing worldview reinforces that worldview instead of disabusing you of it. That's pretty dangerous stuff. Trolls take advantage of this. And what they do, and there are computer programmers in Russia that create bots that do this. There are teenagers in Macedonia that are sitting in their basement getting paid 5 cents a click that do this. And then there are people like Kelly and me who like run nonprofit organizations. We don't do that because our credibility matters, right? It matters what we go on TV and say. It matters what we stand here and say. We put our name and our face and our organization behind it. It's way easier to attack people from an anonymous account. People still troll, as it were, a verb with like their names and who they actually are. Sometimes they hide behind a small veil, sometimes they put it right out there. But at the end of the day, information has become so subjective and truth has moved from truth to truthiness to whatever we have now. I'd say we're like in a post-truthiness world where like you just call it as you see it, right? I'm just saying what's on my mind, right? And we've got the President of the United States who's one of the chief proliferators of false information. That's dangerous in a lot of ways. Chuck and Megan covered it in their column. And for me, the way to fight back against trolling, I think, is to have a group of people that can get together, news agencies, trusted sources, that they're the ones that need to fight back against this. I'm a political animal, right? I used to run campaigns for Democrats. I do all sorts of progressive stuff. I'm not like the best person to come to for an unbiased source of information. I will give you my perspective. I try really hard never to lie to you. Occasionally, I even get tricked by fake news, right? So at the end of the day, that's why we need newspapers. That's why we need television stations. That's why we need gatekeepers of information, people who can verify facts. I saw the chief of staff for the state Senate Republican city, who's a dear friend of mine, tweeted at 8 o'clock in the morning, PolitiFact is a biased, partisan, left-wing source. I don't know what to do with that.
Kelly, would you like to talk about how you handle trolls in your day-to-day operations? Because I know you do. They're out there.
Sorry, getting up for me is a little harder, a little slower. Hopefully it'll speed back up. So a couple points. Number one, Ian and I both go back and forth often and regularly. We have similar jobs on each side of the aisle. So maybe to explain that first, to give this conversation a little bit of context, Ian runs ProgressNow.org, which is an organization, a political 501c3 and C4 on the left. I run CompassColorado.org, which is a political 501c3 and C4 on the right. And then he and I also regularly appear together many places and go back and forth with each of our perspectives about this. So number one, when I have to defend the chief of staff of the Senate, because that was the last thing you said, many of these organizations, whether it's PolitiFact or even Snopes is supposed to be the arbiter of what is fair or what is not, what is correct or what is not on the internet, they sometimes get it wrong. And oftentimes, if you are on the left, you will look at a fact-checking organization and you will see that they get it wrong to the detriment of your side. If you are on the right, you will look at these fact-checking organizations and see that they get it wrong to the detriment of your side. I don't know specifically what he was tweeting about, but many of these new third-party organizations that have popped up with staffs and funding that cause people concern because they are not transparent. 501c4 organizations like Ian and mine don't have to disclose our donors according to the law, and we don't do that. And so it's really hard. I would give both Ian and myself kind of put us in a different category because we both are very upfront with who we are and what we believe. And in many ways, I think that's actually valuable. It's important that when you, and basically the crux of my column this Sunday was that we all have to, by virtue of the democratization of information, we all have to become our own editors and our own filters of information. And so when you read something from me, you will know that it comes from big old Republican conservative perspective, and take that into account when you're reading it. When you read something from Ian, you will know that it came from a big old lefty Democrat perspective, and take that into account. And ultimately, there is so much promise. I loved Ian's column because it was so hopeful, and it talked about how much access we have now and how amazing it is that we can contact these people and we can change things with 140 characters. But with that comes so much danger because these trolls are real. And it's really hard. It's not like the Bat Boy kind of columns that you would see as you're checking out from the grocery store, because fake news sometimes looks exactly like real news. And quite frankly, fake news often, because, and I hope that you guys get into this, fake news often comes up so quickly and in such a prevalent way that it's very difficult for even those arbiters of what is correct and what is not in newspapers and television and radio to be able to fact check fast enough to compete with a blogging class. Also, fake news, one example I used this weekend was, I used an example of a guy who tweeted out that he had seen protesters bust in for Donald Trump, to protest Donald Trump in Austin, Texas. And he took a picture of the buses and he put it up, and then it went up to some of the blogs, some of the conservative blogs, and then eventually that got picked up. And because there were pictures, and because this guy seemed credible, and because there were all of these buses in proximity to these large Donald Trump protests, it seemed that it was credible enough that it became real news. Eventually, we found out that it was incorrect. The buses were actually there for something else, and that no protesters had been bussed in to protest Donald Trump. But that wasn't a case where fake news appeared because anyone was acting in bad faith. That was a case where fake news became proliferated due to the velocity of information. And how do we all keep up with that? It's really, really difficult, and it's a conundrum for all of us. And unfortunately, it comes down to everybody taking personal responsibility for what they tweet, what they share, and what they say. All right.
Yeah, of course, if you've got a quick follow-up. Don't sit down yet.
Yeah, I know, because I'm not getting back. No, I mean, I will.
Introduce yourself so that we
I'm
know.
Ken Johnson with Prosper Systems. I do a little blogging, and I have a couple articles on LinkedIn.
Rock on.
And
See, you're exactly what scares all of the big media organizations. It's great and scary.
I'm scared.
Yeah, and you're the future, and it also like you are the case in point person of exactly what I'm talking about, which is now the responsibility of being truthful falls to you as a content generator. No pressure.
Well, I really work at that, but what you brought up is if you've got somebody, so you've got the difference between, say, parts of Fox News and the very conservative side and the very liberal side. Where's the middle?
Yeah.
Where can you go and say, okay, let's get a sort of a balanced report on this, and you don't find that very often. And And it could be as simple as one side just sort of leaves out a little, either the
Yeah.
the history or the precedent or the whatever.
Or the context. No.
Just, take for instance, the whole thing about, restricting immigration of some kind.
Right.
That's happened 44 times in the last 44 years to different types by, 6 presidents? So what's the real history of that as opposed to, he did 7 countries and most of them are Muslims, so he must be a Muslim hater, and it goes from there.
Okay. There were a couple questions embedded in that, and let me take them one at a time. Some of them are going to be like dark and stormy and jaded answers, and I'm sorry, but I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've watched this evolution. So when I started in politics in 2004, Facebook was not yet a thing. Which, by the way, thank God Facebook was not a thing during my 20s, because it's just like, thank you that is not memorialized anywhere on the internet. That's fantastic. My lovely husband is here today. I'm so glad that my 20s were not memorialized on Facebook. But let's be real frank about how things have changed. The Post is our newspaper of record. It is fantastic. I was very honored to be able to engage in this weekend, but it's no secret that the Sunday Post is a little bit smaller than it used to be, right? Like, it's just the truth. It's sad. In many ways, I think that it is indicative of a larger problem, but that is the case, and that is happening to newspapers and news organizations across the country. And that happens on, I met with some radio people who said that they are moving all of their radio shows to podcasting because they are planning for the day that the towers go dark. That is, yes, they are moving all talk radio shows on one large radio network is being moved to podcasting so that they are prepared for the day that nobody any longer tunes into the AM dial. This is an evolving industry. Communication is changing. And here's when you ask me about the middle. The problem is that what I have yet to see is a profitable way to create actual middle of the road perspectiveless news. There is always somebody who is willing to push an agenda on the left or the right. There is always somebody who is willing to put advocates out there for their industry, for their niche, for whatever it is. This is the inherent societal problem that we always face between the needs of the few and the needs of the many. And the needs of the few, a few people who are willing to give money or to advertise or underwrite their perspective will always win out over asking many people across a broad swath to just create news. Also, I think it's a fallacy that there was ever such a thing as perspectiveless news. I believe, or really objective news, I think that as far as, and I said this in my piece, was that people harken back to the day when Walter Cronkite would say, and that's the way it is at the end of the day, and we say, oh, and that's the way it is. But the reality is that all of those people also had their own perspectives and their own lives, and it's impossible as a human to insulate yourself from that. But the problem is that we haven't yet created a market need and a market demand that will underwrite the cost of creating real, true, objective journalism. And that's really hard. And it's really sad, and I hope that we figure it out, because frankly, it's kind of scary if all you get is advocacy from one side or the other. Okay. Yeah.
And maybe because I'm a dinosaur. When I was in the, when I was in the media, which was over 20 years ago, we did get both sides, and we tried to be objective. You can never not have a perspective, but you can always be fair. And I think that's what's missing today, and I have a hard time with, there is a bias in every transparent bias. You tried to give both sides the best you could. Now, that doesn't mean it wasn't shaded, it wasn't jaded, it wasn't whatever, but at least you gave both sides. Now, nobody seems to care if they give the other side.
So I think we do care very much. Dan, take this one because
I'll
we
step in the fire
do
line. My name's Dan Petty. I'm a senior editor at the Post. I spent time both as a social media editor in sports. I'm 8 years into my career, and if there were a couple things that I saw just in the comments on the articles and the emails I got. Like one of the most consistent things I saw were people saying something along the lines of what you said, which was the reason that news organizations are failing is because you're so far to the left now or you're so far to the right, and that's why nobody trusts you anymore. And I would argue that trust in the media is tracking pretty closely with just trust in institutions generally in this country. We do not trust our governments. We don't trust our churches. We generally trust our military actually quite well and a little bit more, but generally speaking, like, we don't trust our institutions. We don't trust our police departments. There is collectively this massive distrust in institutions, of which we are a big part of that. Do I think that that's part of it? Certainly, but I also think that there are market forces at work that are far more complex and far more damaging to us to be able to deliver news than just, oh, it's because they're biased and so nobody pays attention. I say this all the time. In 20 years, we've seen this massive explosion in publications, digital, print, well, actually probably less so print, digital, television, podcasts, like you name it. You all still only have 24 hours in the day from which to consume yours. Only 24 hours. The amount of time that you spend consuming media, maybe has gone up just because you've been barraged with all these sources, but you now suddenly have this massive influx of perspective. So you can watch Fox News all day, and suddenly you look at somebody like us, or you look at somebody like CNN or MSNBC and say, well, they're very different in their perspective, and Fox News is quite different in its perspective from CNN. So suddenly you've got this cacophony of voices, and I talked a lot about this in my column, but it's so easy, and Ian kind of just mentioned this, it's so easy now to just get trapped in this filter bubble because we have algorithms on social media, on Facebook, elsewhere, that are exposing us to viewpoints that are consistent with our friends. Like in many ways, like our friends are people who probably have very similar views to us. We see this happening both geographically. More, I'd say, left-leaning people are clustering in cities, and it's this massive disengagement and difference between what, say, is happening in the cities versus what's happening in rural areas of this state. I mean, all you have to do is look at the shades of the map in this state by county, and you can just see this massive, massive disconnect between what the city of Denver feels like politically and what, say, Kiowa County feels like. So I certainly, and I guess as me speaking personally, I also think that, again, I think it's easy to say that, it's much more biased now. There were only 4 sources of information 20 years ago. Newspapers, well, more like 25 or 30 years ago. Newspapers, magazines, television stations, and radio. That's it. Like that. And the cost of you getting a megaphone to actually project your views to lots of people was prohibitively high. You had to own a radio station, you had to own millions of dollars in a printing press, you had to have the distribution to be able to get that. Like now, anybody with a computer, anybody with a $100 phone and an internet connection can publish anything to the world. So the ability of people to influence conversation, you don't have to just be a news organization. I could be a guy with 200,000 Twitter followers, and I am a media organization unto myself. And generally speaking, there are studies that show this, that we tend to trust people more than we trust, again, institutions. So you're more likely to listen to somebody who, again, maybe reflects your values, or a friend who shares something. And so what Facebook and the whole fake news thing really takes advantage of is our ability to, or our desire to trust people that we know over institutions. So you may see something posted from the Denver Post Facebook page or one of their pages, but you're far more likely to trust that article or that story if it's coming from a friend of yours. And I've seen plenty of times where there's things shared in my feed, and I just, both from the left and right, I'm not discriminating here, like where I say, oh, like I know that that's not factually correct. But one of the things that was brought up earlier about trolls, like what we're dealing with now is that the pipes with which to deliver this information are just at a level that we have never been able to comprehend in human history. The ability to spread information as quickly as we can now means that the gatekeepers, yes, have fallen away. In some ways that's very good. It means that you're exposed to more viewpoints. It also means that nobody knows, or that we see this erosion in trust about what actually is true and false. And we have this argument. It's like we're arguing about things and we don't even have, you know, the facts to decide. We can't even agree on a common set of facts to decide what it is that is or isn't true. So I think it's much more a reflection of the complexity and the fragmentation. We talk about this all the time, media fragmentation. I mentioned this in my column, like we have a great, amazing audience. What we have a struggle with doing is monetizing that audience. We are reaching more people now than we ever have. We reach 7 million unique individual people per month every day. There is no way in the history of like 30 years ago, like we were physically limited by how far trucks could drive in the middle of the night to deliver a newspaper to somebody's door. Like we don't have that anymore. But with that, you know, we've seen, as I touched on in my message, like we've seen this massive migration of money from our publications toward technology companies. Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Yahoo, and AOL control like 70% of all of the digital advertising in the world. 5 companies, 70% of all the digital advertising in the world. And the other 30% is left for people like us and every other newspaper and every other television station, every other radio station, every other traditional legacy media to fight over. Like, that's a crisis. Like, that's a business crisis. You've seen the New York Times switch itself toward predominantly, and the Washington Post is going in the same direction, the Wall Street Journal is going in the same direction, to predominantly being supported by its readers. The New York Times gets 60% of its revenue now from its readers. Traditionally in newspapers, the split's been 80% of its money comes from advertising and 20% of it comes from subscribers. That's been flipped on its head by those other publications. Now they have high quality content. People are willing to pay for that content, and so they're able to do it. A lot harder to do at the local and regional level. I'd argue that it's actually more important now, but when people make a decision like, well, do I want to pay or subscribe, you know, it's really challenging. This is a very competitive market. There are a lot of legacy companies from our standpoint, the television stations, like we compete hard, and then there are a lot of digital upstarts. You know, the unfortunate thing is that to this point, the digital upstarts and the others are not making up for the declines in the reporting structure and the reporting staff that we've lost as the economics of this business have changed. So, yes? We use monitoring software that looks at, so like we use tools like CrowdTangle that can tell us, which was recently purchased by Facebook, that can tell us in real time, like if somebody has posted something to a Facebook page, like from a competitive set of people, like is this doing well? So like I can see, for instance, when our friends over at 9 News post something and it's seen massive lift, like it's getting shared a lot, it's being commented on a lot. We use things like TweetDeck to actually share stuff out on Twitter. But as I mentioned in my column, like 80% of our social traffic comes from Facebook. Facebook is the giant, massive, huge gorilla in the room that we, for better or worse, can't ignore. I think it's fair to say that most publishers have a pretty wary wariness about Facebook. They're not sure whether to call Facebook a friend or an enemy. It's clearly something that is important to distributing news and information. But if I'm being honest, like and despite the fact that Facebook is making steps toward trying to care about publishers, like at the end of the day, Facebook is responsible to its shareholders as a publicly traded company. And if that involves the media, then great. And if it doesn't involve the media, like frankly, I don't think they could care one way or another. Like the last couple years or so. Mm-hmm. What they have been able to do quite successfully is transition from, and I signed up for Facebook in 2005, like a year after it was born, like when it was only open to college students. And they have managed to transition themselves quite effectively from being a desktop-only publishing platform for information distribution to what most of you have in your hands right now, which is a mobile platform for news information. They get something, I want to say they get somewhere above 65 or 70% of their revenue now, like total revenue from mobile, which is just an astonishing thing. Because if you really want to see the
decline here economically. If a dollar if a print advertisement's worth $1, it translates to about 10 cents on the internet, and it translates to about a penny when you look at it on your phone. So you can see now, again, like when 80% of your revenue is coming from advertising, and you start seeing that the transition from print to digital and desktop, and then the transition to mobile, like you have a serious economic problem on your hands. It is not unique to the Denver Post. It is happening to regional publishers like ours. It's happening to local publishers. It's happening to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal as well. So, again, it's a challenging economic thing. Yes. So we'll get somebody else.
Sorry, hang on. I think Chuck wanted to respond to that last comment.
Just real quick, and then we give it back to Dan. To the question about where is the middle, and I mean, that's supposed to be our role, right? So my answer is, we're your local paper or your local news organization, whether it's print or whether it's video or what have you, that's supposed to be the middle, right? And we're a member of the community, just like people who have a Twitter platform that they're successful at, or some other kind of social media. But we're different because we spend a whole lot of money to have staff a newsroom, and we hire professionals that have educations and training and expertise and the basic concepts of journalism, right? We believe certain things, like there is an objective truth. There is a way to get at a certain series of facts that if you put them together and you look at them fairly from as many different angles as you can in the space that you have available to you, it should add up to something that means something. On the editorial board, this is kind of a metaphor that I'm using that's self-referential, but on the editorial board, people say, well, why do editorials matter? Why do you guys spend money having an editorial board when maybe you should spend your money on more sports or more entertainment or something that gets a lot more clicks? Because if you use the kind of software that Dan and the rest of us look at, and believe me, when I was in the newsroom, I used to joke that they know everything. Big data knows all. They knew how many times I breathed in the course of a day. They know what gets clicks, and editorials are not what gets clicks. Editorials are much smaller down the chain of what gets clicks. But who reads editorials? There are people like you. There are people like the mayor. There are people like the governor. There are people like senators and congressmen. There are people who cause things to happen, who go out in the world and create public policy and do things. And just like a well-done editorial, if it has clout, if people still trust the people who are putting it together, can rock the boat and create social change in a significant way, even though it doesn't have a wide appeal among a mass audience. Same thing is true increasingly with newsrooms. Maybe we don't get the kind of attention, maybe we don't have the kind of funding that we used to have great big newsrooms, but our reach is still big. Why is our reach still big? Why is it that we've never had as many readers as we've had? Why have we never had so many readers as we do now? It's because people are still hungry for those journalistic values. They still want to know, well, I still want to know what the newspaper says about this. And that's what our brand is based upon, and that's what we still believe that is marketable for us. Maybe it won't last forever, but that's what we're trying to fulfill.
Please.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank all of you for bringing us the paper and considering to put that news out there. But the question I have is, I know it used to be that a politician would get a certain number of phone calls, a certain number of letters, and they had a multiple that they would apply, that's to get the opinion. With the new thing that I get a text or I get a Twitter or something, do they have a multiple to use that, or is it just suddenly like some people, that's today's what they want?
So this is exactly what Ian wrote
Yeah.
his column about. I'll let him.
So you mean like what is representative of the overall population based on how many communications you get?
If they get a Twitter, do they have a multiple and say the people are really interested in that, or does that?
I think it's a lot more gut than it is science like that. So I started off my career, I wrote about this in my column as a legislative aide in like 2006 in the state capitol, and I did a lot of emails and phones and letter parsing, tallying up the yeses and the nos and presenting it to the lawmaker. It's different now. It's better in ways now, and it's sort of worse in ways now. Like, raise your hand if you have a Twitter account. Half the room, a little more. Raise your hand if you. Yeah. So you have access and you don't. right? There's a barrier to access to your lawmakers, to your elected officials, to people like Kelly, me, and the newspaper, because you don't have Twitter. Chuck and I were talking about this before we get started. I get 200 emails a day. My staff answers my phone and gives me what I need to know. I have to trust that they're giving me the right things. When I was in the legislature, it was the same deal. I've got my own phone in my pocket. I'm signed into Twitter all the time. Anytime somebody mentions me, likes a thing I did, retweets a thing I did, yells at me, calls me some kind of horrible name, I see it. I see it. Same thing with your lawmakers. Same thing with your editors of the Denver Post. You guys get a mention, you look at it, right? That's powerful. You now have a bigger megaphone than you did before. 10 years ago, 5 years,
You were going to ask about the other sources as well, Facebook.
Well, not necessarily. Well, Google Plus. What the hell is that? It's to the point where like my friends and I have a joke where it's like, "You want to hang out? Where? On Google Plus? What's that?" It's not a thing. Twitter. It's weird. Like politics has decided that insider politics has decided that it takes place on Twitter, right? Like, yeah, sort of middle sphere politics takes place on Facebook, and then outer ring takes place on television. Like where we all yell at each other is on Twitter, and where people yell at their lawmakers is on Twitter, and often your lawmakers will yell back. Like I said, that is powerful. My whole column centered on the fact that if you send an email, place a phone call, write a letter, and to 200 East Colfax Avenue, state capitol, and tweet at your representative, odds are the tweet gets through to that person. Their eyes see it. For now. That could change, but for the time being, if you don't have a Twitter account, sign up for one, especially if you want to engage directly with the people who are making decisions on your behalf that you either voted for or didn't. I'm not sure Donald Trump sees every single reply he gets, because Lord knows there's lots of them, and I'm in there too. But like your state representatives, and I know for a fact, because Kelly and I both work with congressional delegates, your Congress people will see it too.
Unless you take your congressional delegates' Twitter away, which you should if you're a good meeting person.
But they'll find a way to get it.
So we're running a little shy on time. You had a question.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm a journalism student at the University of Missouri, and I'm actually at print and digital, which is funny because print is dying. But so I have kind of a couple.
Transition.
Yeah. I have a couple questions about that. How long realistically do you think it is going to be until the Denver Post and all newspapers within the area are online only? Because let's be realistic. And furthermore, what steps are you going to take to ensure accuracy to timeliness for online printing?
Yeah. Chuck, you want to?
I'm
Whichever
sorry,
one.
I have my own personal theories about this, but I don't know if they. I do have my own personal theories about this, but. Why don't you okay. Whoops, sorry. It's not efficient. First of all, we will continue printing. I think it's fair to say, and I've got my managing editor watching over me as I respond to this question. I believe that we're going to be continuing to. We will continue to print a Sunday paper for a very long time. It is a very critical piece to what we do. We reach a lot of people. Part of it, it's still very much a habit for a lot of people. It is. We certainly notice this that it's still the time and opportunity when people have time off to sit back. I know millennials who get the Sunday Denver Post or get the Sunday New York Times, and they want to sit back in the morning, and maybe they're watching the Sunday shows, they're doing something else, and they want to eat breakfast and hold the Sunday paper or the Sunday Denver Post. I think when it comes to what we have to do, we have to figure out where the information gaps and where we have to follow our consumers. Our consumers are increasingly telling us that they want to reach news on their mobile phones, and so we need to be able to deliver news effectively on our mobile phones, whether that's through social media, whether that's through mobile push notifications, download the Denver Post app, whether that's through a push notification or something like that, whether it's through Facebook, whether it's through Twitter. We need to be where our audience wants to be. So there's a lot of people who have predicted. I think I remember watching the documentary, the New York Times documentary, 5 years ago or something like that, called Page One, and they predicted there that the newspaper was going to be dead in 5 years, and that has long since passed. So I don't like to get into predictions like that because it is really dangerous to predict in this industry. Like, it changes every 3 to 6 months. We focus now a lot more on live video right now because Facebook has deemed and decided that live video is incredibly important in reaching people. So this, like I said, this industry changes so fast that anybody who gives you some prediction about when print is going to die is most certainly going to be wrong. Our goal continues to be and will always be to follow our audiences where they want to get that information, to deliver it, and ideally solving for the issue, which is how do we make money while we're doing that.
Can I speak to that question? If I could win the lottery or if I could somehow come into a lot of money, I would really try to make a go of having a solid print edition. I don't understand why everyone's so afraid of the print edition. Amazon, of all things, is opening bookstores. Amazon, that killed Barnes & Noble and all the other bookstores, is opening bookstores. Books are back. Books are back. Books are up. Publishers are spending more money on books and development of books. And the print product is just so far superior than anything I've ever seen online when it's done well. When you get the New York Times on Sunday, you have got something. And it costs you hardly anything at all. I mean, yeah, the Sunday New York Times is expensive. But my God, it is packed with incredible information across the world. Any kind of niche that you're interested in or any kind of big picture thing you're interested in, it's there and it's laid out in gorgeous pages and it's a pleasure to read. Why wouldn't people want to keep having that? Hipsters like all kinds of weird things, I try to go eat a sandwich and it's got pork belly in it. A pork belly is what I ran away from when I left Arkansas, but now it's hip, It's like you walk through the newsroom and you got these kids like with typewriters on their desk. And like, what's that? You don't even know what that is. You don't know how to use that, but give that to me. It's just so much more satisfying and it's reliable technology. Why do we always have to learn a new way to communicate? Used to, you learned how to communicate and you moved on. Then you focused on the ideas. You focused on what you were supposed to be talking about. Now we're constantly focused on, well, I can draw on this picture and send it to you, and it disappears. And it's that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, that's neat, and that's cool, and that's technology, and that makes the world great and inventive and creative and all those fantastic things, and it makes our movies and our arts and all those things better. But every now and then, you just need the raw piece of information. You need it presented well. And I do think that it's a shame that we sit around and think that print is moribund, that it has no chance, it has no future. I think that a quality print edition could make money, and if people would gamble on it and invest in the resource a little bit more, they might be surprised.
We have time for one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Darren Overstreet with National Guard. So I'm a member here because I want to see, good journalism, quality journalism stick around. Pardon me if I'm a little distracted. I'm still dealing with the possibility that Bad Boy doesn't exist. So, so how does real journalism get to the bottom or work around the real lies that are being said out there without chasing your tail on trying to find the negative, trying to find something that doesn't exist, and continue to look credible, and at the same time reaching out to demographics that we found out existed and may believe some of the lies that are being said. How does this all come together? Whether it's social media or...
Is there someone specifically you wanted to ask that one to, or?
No. Whoever's least afraid.
All right, yeah. Does anyone want to tackle that one? Kelly.
Look, this is an interesting and very difficult question because lies, untruths, things that are inaccurate will be created at a greater rate than they can be fought. Whether that's intentionally, whether that's accidentally, whether it's with good faith, bad faith. And so I think the solution is creating. I'm a conservative. Like I am a free market person, and so I think the solution has to be in creating the market force for that. And what we've seen is that there are some individuals who are willing to underwrite what they call third-party fact checkers, whether that's Snopes or PolitiFact, or I don't know if there's really a center-right one, but there are those organizations that are interested in combating that. But I think one of the things that's most important is everybody taking responsibility for what they share, and that is the beauty and the danger of all of this is that it has taken that power away from the elites. You know, I loved when we were talking about the high barrier to entry that we used to have in order to really engage people. You had to be able to buy a newspaper. The old adage was that you never want to fight with somebody who buys ink by the barrel, right? And now you don't want to fight with somebody who has more than 10,000 Twitter followers. And so the barrier to entry and engagement is much lower, and that takes a lot of power away from the traditional elites, but it also puts a lot of power in each of us, and it becomes a personal responsibility issue. And so what I would say is, regardless of your perspective, if you think there's somebody out there who's doing it well, you should underwrite and support them. So like, for instance, I'm a conservative. I will fight to the death to try to end federal funding for NPR. But, wait. But I give money to NPR personally. The week comes and they do the thing and they basically, and I'm like, stop, please stop. I'm like, I just want to listen to Carl Kasell. Stop asking me for money. But I give money because I value it personally. I don't think that taxpayers should be underwriting it. I don't think that is the proper role of government. I would love to argue that all day long, but the personal responsibility falls to me. And so I give my $10, and then hopefully at the end of the week, they will stop talking and do the thing that they do so well. Because although I disagree fundamentally with many of the things that I hear on NPR, and sometimes I think that they have a bias, I think they enter into this in good faith. And that is something that we all have to take responsibility for, is underwriting and supporting things where we think, like when I say that nobody was biased, or that everyone was at some point biased, I'm not saying that there is no objective journalism at all that people attempt to create. I'm just saying that it's a fallacy that it's possible. But I think if somebody is doing it to the best of their ability, we need to support that.
Yeah, Kelly actually sort of, I wanted to answer your question before. Who in this room has donated to NPR? All right, so like 3/4 of the people who just raised their hand. I know some of you were lying. No, totally. But we're at this point, the point at which we're going to find out. They're going to cut off the NEA. They're going to cut off NPR. They're going to cut off the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. It's a foregone conclusion. Get used to that. Guess what? That's not a huge portion of those organizations' budgets anyway. Most of their funding comes from your $20 during the warp drive that Kelly hates so much that I actually enjoy, because I like when you're a media guy, you know people who work at the radio station, you know they're sitting there trying to force themselves to say things for hours. It's some of the best unintentional comedy you'll ever run across. I highly recommend tuning into the pledge drive. We are at a point where we're going to test the theory. You have market-based journalism, you have public journalism. That's what you have right now. You have things like the Colorado Independent and Denverite, which are news sources of information that are popping up, that are donor-driven. They're supported by their readers. Then you have, and they're nonprofit corporations. They're 501c3s. Then you have the Denver Post and the Washington Post and the New York Times, which are for-profit corporations. We are watching the battle unfold in front of us. I don't know if there will be a winner or a loser, but as far as I'm concerned, it is an interesting time. So I agree with what Kelly said. I agree with what she says a lot, weirdly. But in this case, it is worth your money to support the news that you enjoy consuming. whether that be the Denver Post, whether that be some crazy nutbag on Twitter, whether that be NPR or CPR. It is very much worth your money, because if you don't pay for it and you assume somebody else will, they won't, and it will go away, and then what will you have? You'll have people like me and Kelly screaming partisan crap at you, and then you won't know it's true anymore anyway.
That is such a good note to end on. Support your local media. Thank you all so much for coming. We're going to stick around and answer questions. I know people had questions they didn't get a chance to ask. So thank you for coming. We're going to do more of these social perspective events, and we hope to see you there. And we're agreed. We're doing April 18th, right before 420. We are going to look at marijuana in Colorado and public policy. Probably not, but so please join us again then. Thank you very much.